There's air in the brake lights.
You know, it's funny you should mention that.
I'm not kidding.
No, I got one of those write-ups when I was a mechanic in Long Beach. And I remember the guy, Robert Valdez, he's a hell of a guy. He comes up and he hands me the card. He says, "Mike, you got to bleed the brakes." I'm like, "Why?" Robert said, "They got air in them." Well, I started chuckling. I'm like, "Robert, you better hope they do because it's an air brake system." He goes, "Oh, well." And then I started thinking about it. What he was telling me was the pedal felt spongy. If you have a hydraulic brake system that's got air in it because of a defect, the pedal's spongy. So after I got done chuckling, I said, "Well, actually, he gave me some good information because now I know what the pedal feels like." And he had a treadle valve that we discontinued using because it was called a soft touch brake application valve. It was meant to feel like a hydraulic brake, and it did. It felt like a hydraulic brake with air in it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just didn't feel safe to the driver, so we just swapped out the valve. So, you know, you chuckle at some of the write-ups you get, but if you think about what they're telling you, sometimes it's good information.
Yeah, the first time, it's like, really? And then after that, it's like, okay, yeah, I get it now.
Yeah.
He's equating it to a car.
Yep.
In the field.
Yeah, you get some, "Oh, you need to adjust the carburetor." On a Detroit? You find one of those, you let me know. Okay, now, so most transit agencies activate the retarder off of the position of the throttle pedal. The throttle pedal goes to idle. That means you're not accelerating, so the retarder is going to come on. Now, what happens if the TCM cannot read that the throttle pedal's at idle because of a malfunctioning throttle position sensor? Will the retarder activate? No. If it never sees idle, the retarder's like, "Well, if it's not idling, you're throttling. Why would I want to come on?" Fun to watch. So a lot of times, the bus rolls up, bad brakes. That's usually what operators will put. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. It's all you can deduce because you're not a mechanic. You're not going to get in there and troubleshoot the retarder. So the bus rolls into the shop. He says, "Oh, the driver's complaining the brakes are bad." So one of the first things a mechanic's going to do is he's going to go over to the brake tester and check the brakes. Called a chassis dyno. And if the brakes check out, he's going to the retarder. And a lot of times, it's maintenance's fault. They will have turned it off for a particular reason and forgot to have turned it back on. And right away, you guys say, "Oh man, it went in the shop for brakes and they got the wrong idea. They made it worse." And we're like, "Oh, sorry about that." There you go, fixed. We shoot ourselves in the foot quite a bit in maintenance.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to hook up the retarder. Damn it. I heard that. You said that in your outside voice, Chris.
So when I'm doing the 37 over there in Brea, there's this crazy hill. Could it be that the retarder is off? Because that hill scares me. I mean, it just feels like it's picking up speed like crazy going on that hill. And I don't feel any retarder going into.
It's probably that the retarder's on, but you're asking it to slow the bus down beyond its capacity. In other words, you're going to have to throw some foot brake to help. Remember, the retarder is only good for about 20% of your stopping effort. Now, and don't do this, but one of the ways to see if the retarder was working, and if I were a mechanic, I'd turn the retarder off and go down the hill again. And I would bet you dollars to donuts you'd pick up a hell of a lot of speed. You'd be on those brakes a hell of a lot more than you are. Right?
The light up.
Yeah, that's a scary hill.
So if you let your foot off the throttle and the service brake light comes on the dashboard, the retarder's working, or at least it's activated.
I'm going to try it today.
Okay. No, don't turn off the thing. I did not tell you to do that. You're scaring me.
I don't want to be there.
Don't be in front of her.
If we don't see you Wednesday.
Yeah,
Something happened.
retarder probably wasn't working. But they'll let us know what hospital you're in. We'll visit.
My teacher told me to.
No, your teacher did not tell you to turn off the retarder. That's a maintenance job. Golly. Who's recording this? Okay, I got it. Don't do it!
See, that's why he has to be sure he's saying don't do it. Cause
But yeah, when you go down the hill and let your foot off the throttle, see if that light comes on. It should. Okay. So retarder controls. Receives, interprets speed. This resistance module was a component used in some of the earlier buses that translated the throttle's request into a language the computer could understand. The newer buses, we don't use that module anymore. It's straight off the throttle into Cummins, and then Cummins tells Allison, or Allison also reads the throttle. Because if you pull up the Allison diagnostic software and you look at the data list, and we'll do this when the classes come up, you can read the throttle position. Because Allison needs to see it. It needs to know if you're idle. It needs to know if you're a wide open throttle. Okay. So we have 2 solenoids required to operate this retarder. You've got one that sends air pressure to the accumulator to provide the initial charge into the retarder cavity. And you have one that controls retarder flow valve, which controls pressure to the control valve in the valve body in the retarder. The retarder has its own valve body. Right here. So when I add this, it mates up to the housing, the passage is made up, and we're ready to go. Okay? So we have one controls air into the accumulator, and one controls flow into the retarder valve body. Okay? Sounds good? You're thinking about going and eating. I can tell. I've got leftovers for lunch. All right, we have a retarder temperature sensor used to activate the overtake indicator. So if this thing starts to overheat for some reason, okay, there's a temp sensor in here, and it is located, I think this is it right here, and it will tell the transmission control module that it's getting too hot. And then it will do some things to try and keep the transmission from overheating. We've talked about this before, and we'll mention it here. It will derate how much braking the retarder will do. If I tell it to do less braking, it generates less heat. Y'all follow me? All right. The other thing is we change the shifting. We stretch the upshift so the engine has to spin faster before it shifts. And we activate the downshifting sooner, causing the engine to rev up. It's like, Mike, you've dropped your downshifts, you missed third, caught second, dumped the clutch, right?
Yeah.
Don't do it, but you have, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what happened to the engine RPM?
Shot up.
Yep. Allison's going to do that on purpose. And it's going to, I don't want to say short shift, but it's going to downshift sooner than usual to do exactly what happened when you missed a shift.
Shoot up to RPM, does it slow the vehicle down?
Not so much to slow the vehicle down, but to spin the engine faster.
Oh, yeah.
If the engine's spinning faster, what else is spinning faster? Water pump. So that increases circulation through the cooler to try and get heat off the transmission. Oftentimes that's enough. So let's take your hill. Only let's do it in June when it's 105 outside and your bus is full of people, 49 of your closest friends, and you're going down this hill.
That's scary.
What, 49 of my closest friends are going down the hill? Because if I got 49 friends, I'd like to meet them. So you got a busload of passengers, you're on a hot day, you're going down this hill, this thing can overheat, just because. So it's going to say, hey, we're hot, so the retarder starts to ramp off, if you will. So you're going to have to get into the brakes a little more. Mm-hmm. And then when it's downshifting, it's going to, and you're like, uh-oh, I broke the brakes and the transmission. No, you didn't. That's the transmission trying to get more coolant through the cooler to get heat off the oil to prevent it from further overheating. And it might work. You're like, okay, everything goes back to normal. You come off the hill, transmission cools down, we go back to the standard shift schedule, and that shifts normal. So you come back around that hill again, and then it's like, and it shifts funny. You're like, God, every time I go down this hill, the transmission shifts funny. It must be broke. No, it's trying to stay alive. I'd be like, all right, all you fat people off the bus. No, you're shaking your head, I can't do that? This is your captain, I'd be the captain.
They will go right
This is your
away.
captain speaking. For those of you that stood on the steps and the yellow light went off, that means the scale indicates you're too heavy for the ride. Please exit. Thank you very much. Shortly followed by a trip in the supervisor's car to the unemployment line. Dang!
And hate mail
Yeah,
from passing.
I'd be like getting Jenny Craig writing me, "You are mean!" Would be fun though. Then that guy with his gun, that's not legal. Okay, fine, it should be that way. Alright, since we don't have this bus anymore, we're going to ignore that. Fourth and fifth generation world transmissions use the PCS5 solenoid to control the flow control valve into the retarder. Now, when this transmission's built, the PCS5 solenoid is in the transmission's valve body already. It's like we need a spare solenoid because we got a whole bunch of other things we can do with this. Depending on the equipment on the transmission, that PCS5 solenoid could be used to go into 7th gear. It could be used to activate the transfer case because it's 4-wheel drive. In our case, we use it to activate the solenoids for the flow control valve for the retarder. It's already in there. It's not like they got to add it. Right? This SS2 solenoid, it's already in there too. And it's used to control the retarder accumulator.
Where is that one at?
It's all in the valve body. All in the valve body.
Which one's the valve body again?
That's the bottom.
With all the electronics on the bottom.
Well, that's down here.
Okay.
Actually, hold on. I can do this better.
You can see the valve body.
Alice. Down there.
Show it to all my followers.
You mean from court? Oh,
From court.
you might use that as evidence. See, I was in class. I couldn't have done it. All right. Now, inputs into the transmission that we need to have to make this retarder work. Excuse me. Obviously, the enable switch, that's the on-off switch up in the head sign area. Turns on and off the retarder. Now, you operators aren't allowed to touch that, are you? They don't want you opening that up. Okay.
No, we don't know where it is on top.
You
Only,
do now.
only
Of course, I don't got to worry about you. You're going to be in prison soon anyway.
only radio tells you.
If radio tells you, that's fine. That's actually not a bad thing. Now, if you read the manual, which who does, they will tell you, they being Allison, will tell you to turn it off in inclement weather, which is heavy rain or snow.
Turn the retarder off?
Yes, because the way it comes on, it could actually break traction in the rear end and cause you to lose control.
Yeah, I had it on downhill one time.
In
It
rain,
was raining.
Yeah.
It was in South County on a really steep. and
PCH?
It was a trip, man. I was like, oh my God, yeah.
just drift, man. Just steer in it, drop the
Yeah.
Woohoo!
You just turn the
I drifted my
opposite
motorhome
direction,
once. It was
which is-
awesome. Coming down from Big Bear, there
Oh,
was a
no.
rock in the road, big one. So I went hard left and hard right, you know, get around it. The back end came loose, missed the boulder, and I just steered into it, dropped the throttle, came back around just in time to catch the other corner. I look in my mirror, highway patrol, lighting me up. I was like, dang! Now, fortunately for me, I did not wake up the wife. So I pull over, get out. Like, what is this guy want? He goes, young guy, he's probably 24, 25. Dude! I'm like, okay, things are gonna go well. That was awesome, man! I've never seen somebody drift a motorhome. I said, then you ain't gonna see it again. He says, because it's gonna take me a week to relax. So I get back in, I'm like, hey, I gotta go, because if the wife wakes up, she's gonna wonder, oh yeah, right on, man, I'm cool, go on. So I get it, shut the door, lock it up, fire it up, put it dry, go down the hill. She goes, wakes up, everything okay? Yep, not a problem.
Yeah.
Never mind, we almost went over the freaking guardrail, but no, we're good.
Since you were a cop before, that helps you in that situation, right?
What, me being a cop?
Yeah,
Oh, he
yeah.
didn't know I was a cop.
So you
I didn't
don't-
tell him.
You don't tell them unless it's like, what, last
When I'm
week?
about to get the ticket, that's when I tell him.
When
How
about.
how well
It's a
does that work?
courtesy.
It works pretty good,
Which
right?
damn good.
Yeah, good, yeah, you deserve that.
Yeah, we were coming home from Washington. I thought it was 70. There was apparently underneath the tree there was a sign that says 60 miles an hour. So I go smoking past the trooper at 70. He lights me up, pulls me over, fixing to give me a ticket. I says, I'm kind of used to being on the other side of that ticket book. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, I worked at Long Beach as a cop. I wrote a lot of those. He goes, oh, okay, no, we're good. Then this is where it got bad. He looks at my wife and he says, your job is to make sure he obeys all the laws until you get home. And he looks at me and says, where are you from? I said, California. He goes, oh, sorry about that. I said, yeah, I got to go through Washington, Oregon, and California. Now I've got the DMV instructor sitting next. Thank you. And my wife's cool. I love her to death. She's like, she'll do this. I'm driving along. She'll go, I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Took the air out of the cat.
She grabs the handrail. I says, hey, you want to drive? Oh, no, you're fine. If I'm so fine, why are you making all the noises? Stay in your lane. Do you hear the bot dots? No, then I'm in my damn lane.
Have you ever gotten ticketed from a cop
Yep.
after him knowing you were a cop?
Yep.
Really?
I got pulled over coming off the 405 on Main Street. My brother and I were going to go racing. And they just put up the stop sign. Just put it up last night. So I go blazing through it. Now, mind you, my truck didn't have the registration because I couldn't get it smogged because I basically running a NASCAR V8 in it. It was making about 500 horsepower. It's kind of hard to smog that. Literally came from a NASCAR race crew. So I had it in my truck, get pulled over by the sheriffs. You know why I pulled you over? My brother's like, don't be stupid. I was like, well, that's okay. I was like, no, I have no idea. He said, you ran through the stop sign. I said, what'd they do? Put that up last night? He goes, yeah, actually they did. Because we'd gone down that ramp many times before. I said, oh, well, that kind of sucks. He said, well, your plates are expired. I said, well, I kind of hard time getting a motor smog. He said, why is that? I said, well, it came out of a NASCAR. He said, oh, no way, open the hood. I said, fuck, I got no smog equipment on this thing at all. I said, damn it. So I popped up the hood. He's like, oh, dude, how fast does this go? Oh, I said, 55 nicely. He goes, no, what's the top end of that? My brother's like, 132. We checked it at Riverside. 132. He was doing hot laps in my truck. That thing hauled ass. He goes, well, I'll tell you what, I won't write you for the stop sign, but I got to do something because I already checked out. So I'll write you up for no registration. Just fix it ticket. Just get it registered. I was like, oh, cool, right on.
How'd you get registered?
Went to a shop and they put the tailpipe up at Datsun. Sniffed the Datsun, said it was my Chevy, and we were good. It cost me $300. What's that? No, I don't.
Sounds like it.
No, I haven't
All
been
the
pulled
stories.
over. I've been pulled over in my car, my sedan. 15 years? I haven't been pulled over. No, I take that back. I got pulled over 2 years ago because I didn't put my stickers on my license plate. Ugh, I got pulled over on the 91 coming home. The cop says, well, I'm pulling you over. You don't have your license expired. I said, I haven't got anything in the mail. He says, well, let me see your registration. So I pulled the registration out and stapled to it was a little envelope with the frickin' sticker that I didn't put on my license plate. The cop's laughing at me. He says, you want to put that on now or get a ticket? I said, no, I'll put it on. I swear to God, I heard him laughing as he rolled off. He was a motor cop riding a motorcycle. It was cool. Felt like a dumb moment. All right. Oh, I've had it interesting. I've done all kinds of weird shit in my life. Bought drugs for the Marine Corps. That was awesome. God, it's great. Sitting across from Mercedes-Benz dealer, a 14-year-old pickup with $25,000 cash. Gonna buy some heroin. Look at that Mercedes going, yeah, I'd have change left too. All right. We have a backup to my throttle pedal. If the TCM can't detect that the throttle's at idle, but it sees that you're on the brake, it's going to assume you're slowing down. And it's going to give you a retarder in the absence of an idle signal from the throttle. Now, ABS, and we've talked about this, but I'll mention it again. If I go into an ABS event, we turn off the retarder. I don't want the retarder trying to slow down the rear wheels while ABS is trying to possibly allow one of the two rear wheels to speed up because of it's trying to not let it skid. Y'all see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? What else do I return off in a ABS event? Whoa, who said lock up? You're exactly correct. Why? You knew that was coming, right?
And you won't stop.
Exactly. Exactly. Because we don't want to be in our Ranchero slamming on the brakes without pushing in the clutch. Because that's exactly the result you get. You install a motor. And trust me, you don't want to stall a motor on those bad guys. Because what else do you lose when the motor stops turning? I'll give you a hint. Power steering. Right? Losing power steering is not fun. It's definitely not safe. So we try to avoid it. And one of the ways we do that is we turn off lockup and we turn off the retarder. That makes sense? Anybody not make sense with that? God, I could call you the fugitive like that TV show. Me? Yeah. You're wanted by the cops and you're on the run. And Richard Kimball was falsely identified, so you fit the bill, man. You're 3 for 3. Just saying. Now you got to go home and Google that. It's a cool show.
Yeah.
All right, I'll stop picking on you.
No, that's all right. It's like being at home.
Oh, your wife picks on you too?
Talk
Yeah.
smack all the time.
Actually, when I cook, Lorraine makes sure the batteries and smoke detector are good.
What the means?
Well, one day I tried to cook a meatloaf. Who knew that the smoke detector was not a timing device for the oven? Got me banned from the kitchen. I also got banned from doing laundry.
What
You
you
did that on
did?
purpose.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Put the wife's bras in the dryer.
No,
Yep.
please don't do that.
That's how I got banned from doing laundry.
No.
Yeah, I got banned from that too.
Oh, you too?
Why not? I was trying to help out.
It ruins, not that I wear bras, but it ruins the bras, does it not?
You're just giving all the guys ideas.
Well,
Yeah,
Those
we got
things
one.
are really expensive. Just to put in
Well,
the
no,
dryer.
I know Victoria's Secret now. You know what it is?
All of yeah.
They want all your money.
That's the secret.
That's the secret. I keep yelling at my wife. She's washing my pants wrong.
That's not the secret.
They're shrinking.
It's weird because they only shrink from the sides, but not from the length.
That's odd, isn't it?
Really?
Yeah. Not that I'm growing or gaining weight or anything. If she's washing my pants wrong.
Tighter.
It might say 30. I wish. I haven't had a 30-inch waist since I was like 15.
You're 34.
Oh, be quiet. All right. Outputs. We got to have them. So output for the transmission ECU activates the brake lamps when the retarder is applied. And it may illuminate an optional indicator on the dash. And ours lights up the service brake indicator when the retarder is on. And it's not a bad troubleshooting tool like you mentioned. Because if that's not coming on, you know what I'm doing? I'm checking the switch. It probably got turned off. Maintenance did it, and they just forgot to turn it back on.
What do you mean? A switch?
The retarder enable switch, there's an on-off switch for the retarder. And if I turn it off, then when I let my foot off the throttle, that service light isn't coming on because the retarder's not coming on. So if you have that problem, like, okay, you're road testing a bus for a complaint, and you let off the throttle and you don't, first thing I'm doing, open up the head side door and see if the damn thing's turned on. Then I'll book 3 hours for troubleshooting and take a 2.5-hour nap. Okay, that was just humor. Don't do that.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks for the tip.
You have a retarder temperature indicator that lets me know if this thing's overheating. So the auto apply is the most popular in North America. This is what we do. Transmission control mode reads the throttle percentage and counts or percentages. Counts is another way for a computer to read voltage. Basically, I think it's 924 counts equals 1 volt. Don't worry, it's not going to be on the test. Okay. I know you're like, dang that. Whoo-wee. All right. When idle is detected, application of the retarder begin. Again, we can set it up for 100%. Some properties do. We can set it up to come on in thirds. And it usually, to do the percentage of applied, we need 2 air pressure switches in the system. And if you go out to the bus, you open up the panel underneath the driver's side window, there'll be a row of switches, and 2 of those will be for the retarder. Okay. Come here, out of control. The second air switch is usually set to open at 7 psi. The first one is usually set to open at around 4 psi. By the time you got 7 pounds in the system, you've got 100% of retarder.
But when you were explaining, that's how it works here.
Yep, that's how it works here. Now, some places will have it come on 100% right off throttle. Long Beach did that when I worked there. It wasn't bad. You guys are right in that it just comes on though. And so it could trigger some slip and falls,
Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah.
The nabbies kind of were hard.
Nabbies were hard.
They were hard.
That's one of the
But you're seeing.
very few things I liked about the nabbies. I didn't like a lot about those buses, but the retarder setting was one of them I did like.
It was like, boom, you know.
Came on. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go through this because I've got a video that will actually explain it all.
Two valves control fluid flow in and out of the retarder housing. The retarder control valve, located in the retarder control valve body, and the retarder flow valve, located in the retarder housing. Solenoid K is on top of the retarder control valve.
That's the SS2 for the new Flyers.
A constant flow of control main pressure cascades.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, that was PCS5. That's
When
PCS5.
solenoid K is energized, control main pressure is directed to the top of the control valve, forcing it down against spring pressure. When solenoid K is de-energized, control main pressure is exhausted, and the control valve moves up. Main pressure flows to 2 locations on the control valve. When solenoid K is de-energized, main pressure deadheads at the valve lands in both locations. When solenoid K is energized and the control valve moves down, main pressure is directed to the flow valve. As we'll see later, this forces the flow valve left against spring pressure. Fluid is also directed into the retarder charging circuit. Charging circuit pressure flows under the control valve to help stabilize valve movement. And it also flows into the retarder housing, providing a continual charge of pressure whenever the retarder is applied. The ECU varies retarder charging pressure by rapidly cycling solenoid K on and off to match the amount of retarder requested. This is called pulse width modulation. When the retarder is turned off and solenoid K is de-energized, the control valve moves up. Main pressure that was forcing the flow valve left is now exhausted, and so is the retarder charging circuit. The exhaust check valve, currently used only on HD models, provides resistance to the exhaust circuit when the retarder is off. When the retarder is off, converter out pressure flows through the flow valve, charges the accumulator, and flows into the cooler. Fluid flows through the cooler and back to the flow valve. From here, fluid flows into the main lube circuit, and also through an orifice into the retarder housing. This orifice lube provides plenty of lubrication for the retarder's internal components without causing a drag on the retarder rotor. The constant orifice lube flow forces fluid out of the retarder housing to exhaust. When the retarder is applied, the retarder charging circuit is filled. Main pressure from the retarder control valve forces the flow valve left against spring pressure. Solenoid H is energized, forcing the accumulator piston right and charging the cooler circuit with fluid. Constant fluid flow out of the retarder keeps the accumulator charge from flowing in the wrong direction. The accumulator charge flows through the cooler, through the flow valve, and into the retarder housing. During this time, converter out pressure is directed through the flow valve into the lube circuit. The MD and B300 and B400 systems are very similar to the HD and B500, but the retarder charging circuit routes through the flow valve rather than directly into the retarder housing. All other fluid flows are the same.
Okay, let's look at this for a minute. Now, so I have a PCS5 solenoid in the valve body. I have an SS2 solenoid external on the accumulator. So there's no electrical solenoids in here at all. SS2 mounted on the accumulator, external, usually on the body of the coach near the retarder. And the PCS5 is programmed to be the solenoid to activate, to allow fluid flow to the control valve in the retarder. And it is modulated, so this is how we get that percentage of on. It changes the flow rate as more request is needed to activate the retarder. Okay, now, the aggressiveness of the retarder is controlled by a spring on the back side of the valve, the spool valve that rides in here. If it takes a lot of fluid to push that valve over to start the retardation, we get a lot of retardation. If it doesn't take as much,
That's the spring that you're talking about, that it could be set to low,
Yep.
medium, high.
yep, exactly.
And the heating on that, if it's on high, the spring, that wouldn't cause that heating. Would that
No,
break down?
that was a malfunction of some type.
Oh, it was,
Okay, so when we get a bus, new bus, we buy an order of buses. We take the first article bus, we go out to Baker, California, usually in the summer, and we run it up and down the hill to make
okay.
sure
Who's
that
paid to do that?
our technical services guys, Pat Kershane, Anders Holst, and Antonio Gallego.
Not the drivers.
No. We go out there and we've got sensors logging data all over that bus. If it doesn't pass our specs, we send it back to Flyer and say, hey, this thing's not going to work. And they come out and figure it out. Usually it's,
State line.
huh?
You'll see
Yeah,
them
they'll
on
probably
state
take lunch at State Line.
So you get some buses that don't pass that,
It's not unusual to have a bus that not meet specs. Then we have to come back and usually we mess with that spring in there. So through the valve body, through the valve, when the retarder's not activated, we refill that accumulator. Converter out pressure helps assist in moving the valve into its appropriate location. So the passages will be covered that we don't want the oil to go to, and the passages will be uncovered that we want to direct the oil to. Okay? When we apply the retarder, it comes from the accumulator, through the cooler, through the flow valve, into the retarder, because we want to cool this thing down, because it needs to be as cold as possible, because it's going to be asked to absorb a lot of heat. And then out of the retarder.
How do you know that the accumulator is malfunctioning?
Good question. You will not get an instantaneous response from the retarder. It will be delayed. Because that accumulator supplies the initial charge of oil into the housing. And then the converter flow valve, through the converter flow valve, into the lube and cooler circuit, and then into the retarder. But initially, because of the delay for that to happen, we use the accumulator to put the initial charge into the retarder housing. So if mine's not working, and I let off the throttle, you'll see a weak response.
Now, when replacing that accumulator, do you have to drain it? Drain the...
Usually you pull the line off and drain it. Now if I pull the airline off first,
Yeah, the airline.
because if there's a lot of oil coming out of where the airline is, I've got a problem internally and I've got to just replace that accumulator. Leaking diaphragm, something like that. You'll get some, so when you hear the retarder exhaust after it's done, you may see a little oil vapor. But if it's looking like, a puddle, or I take the line off and it's coming out, like, man, that's a lot of oil.
Oh, the air compressor. That, when you say, when it expels that, the air dryer.
Yeah. It shouldn't have transmission oil in it. Is that where you were going?
No, yeah, that's what it could go through there, through the system.
That's a great question, and I'm going to say no. You shouldn't have transmission oil.
It's linked to the air system.
It is through so you've got a line coming off of a tank that feeds the SS2 solenoid that then when it's activated will allow air into the accumulator. Okay? So I've got a tank that I draw my air supply for the accumulator. Probably, it could possibly be the wet tank. Now, because it's positive airflow through the dryer. So when the dryer goes into its purge mode, the inlet's blocked from the dryer to the compressor, so I don't bleed that down. And the exhaust is open to purge. But I have check valves in the system that would keep the tank from backfeeding. That's a great question though, and I'm glad you asked it. So if everything's working correctly, there's no way that air could get back into the dryer.
I forgot that it might have had a check valve.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That was an awesome question, and I'm glad you asked it. Yes?
So is the staggered, for our buses, the staggered retarders are controlled by the retarder control valve?
It's initially controlled by the TCM.
Okay.
Okay, now I know where you're going with this. The fact that I get 33% on the initial
Right.
is controlled by modulating the PCS5 solenoid. So if I only open it a little bit, I get to 33%. And then as I hit the first switch, that's an input into the TCM, and then the TCM changes the modulation of that valve, that PCS5 valve in the valve body. Now I get 66%.
Okay.
And if I hit the second switch, that's the third input into the TCM, and the modulation changes, and I get 100%.
It's all through the valve body.
Yeah, well, part of it's the valve body, but part of it's the TCM. The
Right,
TCM
right.
sends out the command, the valve moves to where it's told to, and the flow is regulated that way.
Right, but
Good.
hydraulic-wise, it's...
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, all through the valve body. Awesome, guys. Those are great questions. So the vehicle must be moving 3 to 5 miles an hour for the retarder to come on. Why is that important? Well, if you're sitting here in the stall with the bus running and at idle, and you've got the data up, and you're not seeing any of the solenoids turning on, you're like, oh, the solenoids or harness is bad. No. Remember, it shuts off at 3 to 5 miles an hour. So trying to check it when it's stopped isn't getting you anything. Y'all follow me on this? You actually have the bus moving to do this. That means somebody's driving and you're watching the laptop. Do not try and do that yourself. It's a ticketable offense. Distracted driving. And in a bus, you don't have fender benders. You wipe stuff out. Well, I had a fender bender on a smart car. Yeah, how'd that work? Let's see, 17 tons versus about 1.5 tons. Okay, so if you need to do that, you're going to have someone else drive the bus for you. I don't know if that's policy over there for you guys. It is here. You cannot be driving and looking at the same time. That's a nightmare waiting to happen. Okay, it really is. Once the vehicle speed drops below 3 to 5 miles an hour, the retarder deactivates. Now, you're out of lockup, you're hydraulically coupled, but you don't want that retarder at 3 to 5 miles an hour. Number one, its efficiency is reduced because the speed's reduced. And 3 to 5, you got foundation brakes, man. Or if you're really lazy and you don't feel like moving your chubby little foot, throw the interlock on. That's just, don't do that.
Thanks for the tip.
Your driving tips by the maintenance instructor, the guy that does not drive professionally for a living. Sounded good, buddy. All right, so the retarder controls configuration might vary, and it is. property to property, and sometimes series to series, although we try not to do that. Because your bus is in the shop, you get a new series bus for replacement, all of a sudden everything's different, you're like, I don't know if this thing's working or not. Tartar can be disabled when in inclement weather or slippery road conditions. Should be, that comes out of their manual. We don't usually have that problem here, we don't have snow, unless you got that express route to Juneau, and you really piss somebody off. The retarder is automatically disengaged when the vehicle's ABS system comes on. Also, the ABS system turns off lockup. Now, why this is important is to maintenance people is this. If my ABS controller is faulty and it stays on, how is that going to feel to my drivers? What's deactivated? Retarder and lockup. Slow bus, no brakes. Which is better than a fast bus with no brakes, I guess. Now, a rookie mechanic would think, I've got two separate problems. Brakes and transmission, or brakes and engine. And that's a lot. I mean, that's not a bad thought. Okay, I can see the logic behind that. Well, I got a slow bus, so I must have a problem with the motor. And by coincidence, I'm also having a faulty brake system. But when you're a mechanic, you have to think outside the box. Well, what do they share? What are some of the other subsystems that affect the performance of the engine/transmission and the brakes? And one of the common links is the ABS system. And we've had a few buses where that thing's malfunctioned, and we've had exactly that. No retarder and no lockup. And mechanics were on it for a few days until somebody's out on a road test with the Allison software up looking to see if there's a problem in the transmission, and they happen to notice while they're accelerating, ABS status on. So we pulled over to a bus bench, cracked that panel behind the driver, disconnected the ABS controller, and everything worked fine. New ABS controller. I mean, sometimes it can be that simple, but to find that easy fix, these guys were on it for a couple days. And to their benefit, they did not start throwing parts at this thing. They troubleshot. They did a leak down on all the cylinders, and we'll talk about this in engine class, and they determined that all the cylinders in the engine were fine. They looked in the history, it had a recent tune-up. They looked at the turbo settings. Does that give you a slow bus? They took the bus off the brake dyno and they checked the brakes. They were fine. So the guy's going, well, the only thing that really slows this thing down good is the retarder. So he started looking into the retarder on the transmission side of the house. And he took it on a road test and he saw that, well, I was getting throttle and it saw idle, but it wasn't coming on. So he knew the throttle was good. And he just happened to look over. He said, oh, the retarder switch is on, so the retarder's on, duh. And while he was checking that, he looked over while it was being driven, and he noticed the ABS status was active or on. He said, wait a minute, not in an ABS event. And that's when 2 + 2 became defective ABS controller. He said, well, but if the ABS is on, the retarder's off, hence the bad brakes, and lockup is off, hence the slow bus. So to test his theory, which mechanics do, they have a theory, and it's not the problem until they prove it, right? Well, I have a theory that the reason causing this poor braking and this poor power is not the engine or brakes, it's the ABS controller. So he pulled over, opened up the panel, disconnected it, drove the bus, lockup worked, and
Where's that located?
on our bus,
Behind the head side, right?
no, on our bus it's
Top of the front door.
It's either top of the front door, top of the rear door, or street side above the lights behind the driver. He undid the controller, he got lockup, he got retarder, everybody was happy, controller was bad. So the initial response to something like that is bad brakes, bad engine. Okay? Now, if the retarder malfunctions, the effect would be very noticeable to the operator, obviously, right? But then it would be noticeable to maintenance when this thing's rolling in for relines about every 9,000 miles, which that's probably what you'd be. Because think about, I mean, how many times do you slow that bus down a day? Beaucoup. Yeah, think about without the retarder, how much more brake you would have to use to do that,
Yeah.
right? So obviously, you would be writing it up as bad brakes. Comes in initially, and it's happened, we would put brakes on it. Depending on the workload, we'd say, we need it out, just throw brakes on it, we don't have time to mess with it. I don't agree with that, but then I'm not managing the shop downstairs trying to make pull-out either. So they'll throw a set of brakes on it, mechanic road tests it, maybe he notices that it's heavy braking, maybe he's in a hurry, brakes are fine, releases the bus. You get it the next day, didn't fix it, comes back in. Now, mistakes happen. The second supervisor could say throw another set of brakes on it, not realizing it just had a set. It goes out again. At some point, somebody's gonna say, yeah, you know, I had 3 relines in 4 weeks. Am I right? It's happened. Probably happened in your shop too. 3 relines in 4 weeks and it still won't stop. What? Well, and the question comes to mind, what else helps it stop?
It's always that one mechanic that takes his job seriously. He's like, what the hell are we doing here? We put brakes in this 3 times already.
Well, and a lot of our mechanics will be like, hey, wait, I just relined this bus 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Last week. I don't care. I need to make pull-out. Put on some brakes on it, dynamo, put it on the road. And the guy's like, okay. And I've walked in on Graveyard and I've watched Flo. He's our brake mechanic. And he's like, how's it going? Fuck you. Okay. At night. We road tested? Why? They're gonna work. What's the problem? Bad brakes. And I said, well, anybody check the retarder? Oh, God damn it! I was like, whoa, fuck, man. Son